You're not going to believe this, but Karen actually called 911 on my golden retriever just because he was swimming in the lake in my own backyard. Yes, you heard that right. Buster, the friendliest golden on the planet, was simply enjoying a peaceful morning, gently paddling and wagging his tail through the cool water, when Karen appeared out of nowhere, screaming like she was being attacked by a monster. I stood there, coffee still warm in my hand, completely stunned, watching this unfold. Karen, wearing her bright pink polo and khaki pants, face flushed red with anger, standing right at the lake's edge, pointing at Buster and shouting, "I want you to get that animal out of my lake right GHT now! He's destroying my property." I took a breath, trying to stay calm, and replied politely, "Karen, with all due respect, the lake is entirely within my property lines, and Buster is just swimming for his hip therapy. I can show you the paperwork if you're concerned." But instead of stopping, Karen's eyes widened, she shook her head furiously, pulled out her phone, and dialed 911 right in front of me, hissing, "I'm calling the police. I will have that monster removed from my lake HOA. Have you ever seen a neighbor call the cops on a dog for swimming?" I stood there under a perfect blue sky, hearing Karen tell the 911 dispatcher, "There's a vicious animal attacking my lakefront. The owner refuses to control it and is threatening me." Meanwhile, Buster was still floating calmly, occasionally looking over at me with that innocent tilt of his head, confused about why his peaceful swim had suddenly turned into chaos. About 20 minutes later, 2 police cruisers rolled slowly up my driveway, lights reflecting off the rippling water. Karen stood there with her arms crossed, wearing a smug smile as the officers stepped out, walking toward me, ready to ask the kind of questions no one would ever expect to hear because of a golden retriever swimming in a lake. But what Karen didn't know was that this ridiculous call would be the beginning of the day she destroyed her entire scam operation with her own hands. If you think this story ends with Karen calling 911 on my dog, you're wrong. It gets way crazier from here. Before Karen ever screamed about her lake, before the police cruisers, before the insane phone calls and threats, there was just me, a tired software developer, and Buster, a golden retriever who had been through more than most humans I know. I adopted Buster from a rescue 3 years ago. He had hip dysplasia so bad he could barely stand without trembling. The first time I saw him, he looked up at me with those gentle brown eyes, tail giving a tiny wag, even though it clearly hurt him to move. Everyone at the shelter said he was a good boy, but he needed someone who wouldn't give up on him. And I promised him that day I wouldn't. I work remotely, coding from home, debugging client projects that often leave me exhausted, eyes strained from staring at endless lines of code. But no matter how late I worked, I always made time for Buster's slow walks, careful stretches, and vet visits. The vet told me the best therapy for Buster's hips was swimming. It was the one thing that would let him build muscle without pain. So every Saturday, I'd drive him across town to the only pet-friendly lake I could find, watching him paddle around, tail wagging in the water, a dog-shaped smile on his face. Those moments became the only times in my week that truly felt peaceful. So I started saving. Every overtime contract, every skipped vacation, every coffee made at home instead of the overpriced shop down the street, was for one thing: a house with a lake where Buster could swim freely, every day. It took 5 years, but I finally found it. A modest home with a small, private lake in the backyard, just big enough for Buster to have his own peaceful swimming space. When I signed those papers and got the keys, it felt like everything I had worked for finally made sense. Buster explored every inch of that backyard, sniffing the grass, rolling in the sun, and when he finally paddled into the water that first morning, I saw him look back at me with the happiest expression I'd ever seen. That lake wasn't just water. It was Buster's second chance at a pain-free life. It was my small piece of the American dream. I never thought a neighbor would try to take that away from him. I never imagined someone would be so bitter, so controlling, that they would call the police to drag my dog out of his own lake, simply because they couldn't stand seeing someone else's happiness. But that's exactly what Karen did. And what I didn't know then was that Karen wasn't just a grumpy neighbor. She was about to become the biggest nightmare of my life. If you thought Karen calling 911 on my golden retriever was the peak of her insanity, you have no idea how far she was willing to go to steal what wasn't hers. The morning after the 911 call, I woke up early to Buster's gentle nudges, tail wagging, excited for his morning swim. Coffee in hand, I stepped out onto the deck, expecting the calm ripple of the water and the quiet, soft splash of Buster's paws as he paddled happily. But I froze the moment I saw it. All around the edge of my lake, there were sturdy wooden stakes hammered into the ground, each topped with bright orange flags flickering in the breeze like little beacons of Karen's insanity. Attached to each stake was a laminated sign with bold black letters, Martinez Property Shoreline Access Est, 1987. For a moment, I thought my sleep-deprived brain was playing tricks on me. But no, every stake was real, lined up with military precision, like a twisted fence encircling the water Buster loved most in this world, and that's when I saw her. Karen, in her neon pink polo shirt, arms folded across her chest, standing on the property line with that smug smirk that made my blood boil. Now you get it, Ethan. This lake belongs to my family. I'm just taking back what's ours. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm. Karen, this lake is on my property. I have the deed, the survey. It's legally mine. Her smile twisted into something colder. Oh, those worthless papers. We'll see about that. I have original documents from 1987 that prove this shoreline has belonged to my family since before you were even born. And with that, she turned and walked back into her house, leaving me standing there, coffee cooling in my hands, staring at what looked like an invasion army of orange flags. What hurt more was the look Buster gave me as he stood near the water's edge, tilting his head in confusion. His eyes seemed to ask, "Why can't I swim, Dad? What's happening?" That look was worse than anything Karen could have ever shouted. I spent the rest of the morning pacing around the lake, checking every marker. Each one was measured precisely, spaced evenly, with handwritten measurements in pencil along the stakes. Karen hadn't done this out of impulse. This was calculated, prepared, and executed with chilling attention to detail. She had measured exact distances around the lake, used a level to ensure the signs were perfectly straight, laminated the signs to look official, hammered the stakes in deep enough that it took real effort to remove them. This wasn't the action of a confused widow. This was an orchestrated, deliberate attempt to steal what I had spent 5 years saving for, working overtime, skipping vacations, sacrificing piece by piece to build for Buster and myself. And Karen knew exactly what she was doing. I could see it in her eyes every time she looked at the lake, like she was already picturing herself swimming in it, claiming it, making it hers. I spent that afternoon pulling out each stake, one by one, stacking them by the fence. But as I worked, I could feel Karen's eyes on me from her window, that same cold smirk glued to her face. At one point, she opened her window and yelled, "You're making a big mistake, Ethan. Those are on my property. If you remove them, I'll sue you for everything you have." I didn't answer. I didn't look up. I just kept working, jaw clenched, trying to stay calm for Buster, who watched me with worried eyes as I ripped out each stake, tossing them aside. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the deck, Buster resting his head on my feet, the moon reflecting on the lake's surface, making it look like glass. But the peaceful reflection didn't match the storm in my mind. Because I knew this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't done. She wouldn't stop until she took everything. And deep down, I knew. Those stakes were only the beginning. The next morning, I called the city's planning department, the county recorder's office, and my lawyer friend. I needed to confirm what I already knew: the lake was on my property. There was no Martinez claim dating back to 1987. The subdivision was developed in 1962, and the entire lake had always been part of my lot. The city clerk was sympathetic but said something that chilled me. "We've had cases like this before. People trying to steal property using fake markers and fabricated claims. It usually ends in court. Be careful." I spent that day reviewing my security camera footage, and what I found made my skin crawl. At 2:00 a.m., under the cover of darkness, Karen had walked along the lake with a flashlight, a measuring tape, a hammer, and a stack of stakes. She measured each spot with careful precision, hammered the stakes into the soil, wiped them down, and adjusted them until they were perfectly aligned. This wasn't a neighborly dispute. This was a calculated, professional operation. And I had a horrible realization: Karen was running a scam. And I was her next target. If you think fake property markers are the worst Karen could do, wait until you find out what she's really been up to. Because what I discovered next about Karen's past, and the family she had ruined before me, would change everything I thought I knew about the nice, concerned neighbor next door. I used to think Karen was just an annoying neighbor. That night, sitting at my desk with Buster curled up by my feet, I realized she wasn't just a control freak. She was a predator hiding behind a fake smile, waiting for her next victim. As I sorted through property deeds, survey maps of the lake, and photos of the fake stakes Karen had planted around my lake in the dead of night, a question burned in my mind: why would someone go this far over a small lake? I opened my laptop and typed, "Karen property disputes." At first, the results were nothing, random posts and irrelevant articles. But then I found it, a local news piece titled, "Local Woman Helps Family Settle Property Dispute." Karen stood in the photo, smiling brightly next to a young couple in front of a modest home. Something in my gut told me this wasn't what it looked like. I clicked the article. It described how Karen had helped a young military family settle a property line dispute over a fence that was 3 feet off. The article ended with a feel good line. Thanks to Karen's help, the family avoided a lengthy legal battle. I didn't buy it. I kept digging and found another article, 6 months later, with the headline, Johnson family forced to sell home amid ongoing dispute. They had sold the house for tens of thousands below market value. The buyer, Property Holdings LLC. My stomach dropped. I found another case, an elderly couple, the Williams family, who had lived in their home for over 30 years. Suddenly, Karen informed them that their driveway encroached on a neighbor's property. She helped them navigate the issue, but the cost of relocating their driveway was too high. They sold the house. The buyer again, Property Holdings LLC. Then came the case of Rodriguez, a single mother and a teacher, who was told by Karen that her backyard shed violated setback codes. Karen presented her with official documents, stating the fines would be thousands per day unless she removed it. Unable to afford legal help, Rodriguez sold her home quickly. The buyer, again, Property Holdings LLC. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding. Buster lifted his head, watching me with tired, worried eyes. Karen wasn't just after my lake. She had done this before. Over and over. I printed every article highlighting the similarities: vulnerable victims, young families, elderly couples, single mothers, Karen helping identify disputes. They sell their homes for far below market value. The same buyer, every time. I created a folder titled, Karen Evidence. Inside, I placed my property and lake ownership documents. The video of Karen hammering stakes at night. Photos of her fake boundary markers. The articles about the Johnsons, Williams, and Rodriguez families. I found Rodriguez on Facebook and messaged her. Sorry to bother you, but I'm having trouble with Karen. Could we talk? The next morning, she agreed to a video call. Rodriguez cried as she recounted how Karen convinced her she was facing financial ruin unless she sold her home. She said, I didn't know what else to do. I just wanted to protect my daughter. Hearing her voice break, I realized there was no turning back. If I didn't fight, I would be Karen's next victim. Just another family forced out of their home. I posted in the neighborhood group. Has anyone else had Karen bring up property lines with them? Within 3 days, 5 neighbors privately messaged me. They shared stories of Karen threatening lawsuits, telling them to move fences, cut down trees, or pay fines for supposed violations. I realized Karen had used the same tactic for years, targeting those who lacked the money or time to fight back. That night sleep was impossible. Karen had destroyed 3 families. And now, she was coming for me. I stepped out onto my porch. Buster followed, pressing against my leg as we looked out at the moonlit lake Karen claimed was hers. I scratched Buster's ears and whispered, It's time, buddy. I knew that the only way to beat Karen wasn't through expensive lawsuits or endless complaints. It was to let her ego and arrogance expose her in front of everyone she had ever lied to. Karen thought she was clever, that people would always give up before fighting back. But she chose the wrong target this time. My plan started with a simple post in our neighborhood group. Hosting a BBQ this weekend at my place! Come by for food and drinks, and I'd like to share some important updates about the lake. That's it. No mention of Karen, no talk of disputes. Just a BBQ with cold beer, hot burgers, and kids' laughter. Karen immediately jumped in the comment seat. I'll be there to ensure HOA compliance. I simply replied, the more, the merrier. Inside, I knew she had taken the bait. A few days later, Karen called me, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Ethan, I heard you're dealing with legal troubles. I've helped many families sell their homes to avoid lawsuits. I know buyers who can take it off your hands quickly, for a good price. I pretended to be nervous, letting my voice shake. Really? Are you sure? How much would I even get? Karen replied, confidently, just sell for 20–30% below market value, and your legal problems will disappear. I've helped other families, trust me. I swallowed my anger, keeping my tone small. Thanks, I'll think about it. I recorded every word and saved it in a folder titled, Karen. That night, I prepared everything. I set up a large screen in my backyard with soft music, the smell of grilled burgers in the air, and kids laughing as they played. But that screen wasn't for cartoons. My laptop was ready, a recording of Karen admitting her plan. Security footage of Karen planting fake stakes around the lake at 2 a.m. Photos of her fingerprints on those stakes. News articles about the families she had forced to sell their homes. Buster sat by my side, his dark eyes watching me as I scratched his ears. Almost there, buddy. A BBQ day arrived. Neighbors came in droves, laughing, sharing plate cookies and hot sausages. Then Karen showed up. Pink polo, sunglasses, coffee in hand, scanning the yard like she owned the place. She walked up with a tight smile. Quite the gathering. I simply nodded. Thanks for coming, Karen. Once everyone had eaten, I turned off the music and stepped into the center of the yard. Thank you all for coming today. I have something important I need to share to me. Karen crossed her arms, smirking, expecting an apology. I pressed play. The screen lit up. Karen's syrupy voice filled the yard. Sell for 20–30% under market, and the paperwork will sort itself out once you're gone. A ripple of whispers moved through the crowd. Karen froze. Then came the footage. Karen, dressed in dark clothes, hammer in hand, planting stakes around the lake at 2 a.m., wiping her hands, adjusting the stakes until they were perfectly straight, standing over the lake like a predator. Next, a photo of her fingerprints on the stakes. Then, headlines about the Johnson, Williams, and Rodriguez families, forced to sell their homes because of legal issues. The Karen's voice played again. Just sell it cheap, and everything will fall into place. The yard fell silent. A frail elderly woman raised a trembling hand. Karen, did you make me tear down my fence last year? Was that real? A middle-aged man clenched his jaw. You threatened to sue me over my driveway, Karen. Voices rose, one after another. Karen told me. Karen threatened. Karen said. Karen began to unravel, her voice rising in a shriek. Stop this! You're all being fooled! This is a setup. She lunged, trying to grab my laptop. Buster barked, leaping in front of me. Karen stumbled backward, tripped over a table, and fell straight into the lake. Water splashed everywhere. Karen surfaced, hair matted, mascara streaming down her face. Laughter broke out across the yard. Karen screamed from the water. I'll sue you all. I'll sue you. No one cared. A neighbor pulled out their phone and called the police. When the officers arrived, I handed them the audio recording. The video of Karen's confession. The security footage. The fingerprint evidence. The articles. Karen was pulled from the lake, dripping wet, mud-smeared, her face pale. Handcuffs clicked around her wrists as she cursed and screamed, but for the first time, Karen had no power. I sat down, Buster pressing against my leg, his warm brown eyes meeting mine. I scratched his ears and whispered, "It's over, buddy." Karen thought she was clever. But this time, she picked the wrong target. Karen was handcuffed, water dripping from her soaked clothes, mascara streaked down her pale face, eyes flashing with hate and fear. She screamed, "I'll sue you. You'll all pay for this." But no one cared anymore. Neighbors stood in stunned silence, then slowly, the first claps began, growing louder until the entire backyard was echoing with applause. Buster sat beside me, tail thumping softly, his warm eyes calm. We both knew it was finally over. But deep down, I knew it wasn't truly over yet. That night, I sent every piece of evidence to the police and my lawyer, the phone recordings of Karen's confession. Security footage of her planting fake stakes. Fingerprint evidence. News articles about the 3 families she had destroyed. The next morning, the headline hit local news: Dog Hero exposes HOA property scam, Karen arrested. The video of Karen falling into the lake while trying to snatch my laptop went viral, racking up millions of views within days. People cheered for Buster, who calmly retrieved the phone from the water while Karen flailed in the mud. Buster, once falsely accused of being a dangerous dog, had become the symbol of justice in our neighborhood. Messages began pouring in from Karen's past victims. Mrs. Rodriguez called, her voice trembling. "Thank you for standing up. We couldn't fight her, but you did." The Johnson and Williams families agreed to testify, sending me videos describing how Karen had forced them to sell their homes under threats of lawsuits and fake legal documents. Neighbors who once doubted me knocked on my door, shaking my hand, apologizing for believing Karen's lies. Then came Karen's court day. She sat at the defendant's table, her hair messy, wearing a wrinkled suit, refusing to meet my eyes as I entered. The judge listed her charges: fraud, forgery, harassment, and animal cruelty. The courtroom was silent as Karen's confession played on the screen, her voice clear. Sell at 20–30% below market, and your legal problems will disappear. Karen's shoulders shook, her mouth opening and closing, unable to deny her own words. Victim after victim stood to testify. Mrs. Rodriguez spoke through tears about her daughter crying every night over losing their home. Mr. Johnson described how his children had to leave their school and friends. Mrs. Williams spoke about losing the home they planned to retire in. Karen remained slumped, her hands trembling, with nothing left to say. Then it was my turn. I took a deep breath, remembering that day Buster was accused, the day Karen tried to steal my lake. I wasn't afraid of Karen. I was afraid of staying silent and letting her destroy more families. I could almost feel Buster's calm eyes reminding me to stand firm. Finally, the judge struck the gavel and spoke. Karen was found guilty. She was sentenced to full restitution to the victims. 6 months of community service cleaning around the lake she tried to steal. 3 years of probation, with strict orders never to contact me or the victims again. Karen burst into tears, screaming as officers led her away, but it was too late. That evening, our neighborhood celebrated. Music, laughter, and the smell of grilled food filled the air. Children played while neighbors cheered and clinked glasses, enjoying the peace they had reclaimed. Together we tore down the fake stakes Karen had planted, throwing them into the dumpster, each thud a victory. People patted Buster, calling him a hero, as he wagged his tail, accepting treats from everyone. I sat by the lake under the moonlight, the water calm once more. Buster rested his head on my knee, his eyes closing peacefully. I whispered, "It's over, buddy." Because it truly was. Karen had thought she was untouchable. She had forgotten one truth: when a community stands together, no scam can break them. Ever since Karen was taken away, the lake has become the heart of our neighborhood again. Every evening, I sit on the wooden bench under the old willow, coffee in hand, watching the sunset scatter gold across the water. Buster swims happily, sending ripples across the calm surface, each splash a reminder of how far we've come. Children laugh as they chase each other along the lakeshore. Neighbors walk their dogs, pausing to chat, checking in on each other's families and gardens. There's no fear of boundary violations anymore, no threats of lawsuits lurking in the air. The lake is no longer a place of tension or fear. It has returned to what it was always meant to be: a place of healing, laughter, and connection. One evening, Mrs. Rodriguez stopped by with a tray of cookies she had baked herself. She sat beside me, looking out at the shimmering water, and said softly, "Because of you, we can have peaceful evenings like this again." I smiled, glancing at Buster chasing a ball by the water, feeling a quiet peace I hadn't felt in months. Buster is now the hero of the lake. Whenever someone pets him, he looks up, tail wagging, those dark eyes filled with warmth and gentleness. No one calls him that troublesome dog anymore. One afternoon, while I was tying a buoy by the dock, a little boy from down the street ran up and asked, "Mister, are you scared Karen will come back?" I laughed, ruffling his hair. "No, buddy. Because when a community stands together, no one can take our peace away." That night Buster and I sat by the lake under the moonlight. The gentle breeze, the quiet hum of crickets, the soft ripples against the dock, it felt like the world was finally at ease. I leaned down and whispered to Buster, "We did it, buddy. We protected this place." He looked up at me, tail thumping softly, as if he understood perfectly. Karen thought power and manipulation would let her win. But she forgot that kindness, courage, and the quiet strength of everyday people are stronger than any scam. If you've ever felt threatened, bullied, or isolated, remember this: when you stand up for what is right, you are never truly alone. There will always be people ready to stand beside you to protect what matters. And one day, you will sit under a quiet sky, watching the water ripple in the sunset, smiling because you chose not to give up. Before you go, I want to leave you with this: if this story resonated with you, if it made you feel that justice can still win, if it reminded you that kindness and courage matter in a world that often forgets it, hit that like button so YouTube knows this is the kind of story worth sharing. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had a neighbor like Karen? How would you have handled it? Or simply let me know where you're watching from, so we can see how far Buster's story travels. Share this video with a friend or family member who needs hope, who might be fighting their own Karen, so they know they're not alone. And if you love real stories of everyday people standing up against bullies, if you love the reminder that community matters, and if you want more stories that leave you feeling inspired and ready to protect your peace, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Every week, I share stories like this: stories of courage, of quiet victories, of people who chose not to back down. Thank you for spending your time here with me and Buster. Remember, your peace is worth protecting. Your voice matters. And sometimes, standing up quietly is the most powerful thing you can do. See you in the next story.